Rachel understood something was wrong because of a story she had already heard before. It happened during a dinner with Daniel's coworkers on a Friday evening. Nothing important had happened that day. Rachel had almost stayed home because she had spent most of the afternoon with a headache and barely had enough energy to get ready. She remembered standing in front of the mirror before leaving, staring at herself for a few extra seconds and thinking about canceling. But Daniel had asked her to come. Not insist, just ask. So she did. The restaurant was crowded and loud enough that conversations overlapped constantly. Glasses touched against each other, waiters moved between tables, someone somewhere near them celebrated a birthday, and every few minutes laughter rose from different parts of the room. Rachel had always disliked places where too many conversations happened at once. She often felt like she could hear everything and nothing at the same time. Daniel sat beside her. Across from them sat two women from his office and another designer Rachel had met once before but barely remembered. At first, everything felt ordinary. People talked about work, vacation plans, someone complained about apartment prices, someone else joked about quitting and opening a coffee shop instead. Rachel relaxed a little. Then, one of Daniel's coworkers laughed and asked, "So how did you even end up switching careers? Weren't you doing something completely different before?" Rachel smiled automatically. She knew this story. She had heard it dozens of times. Daniel usually told it almost the same way every time. He used to talk about hating his old job and feeling trapped. Then he would laugh about how terrified he had been to quit because they had just moved into a new apartment and suddenly had bills that felt too large and savings that felt too small. Then usually he mentioned Rachel. Not dramatically, just naturally. He used to say she sat with him on the kitchen floor at 2 a.m. while papers and resumes were spread around them. He used to say Rachel kept telling him that being afraid didn't automatically mean something was wrong. Rachel loved that part. Not because it was romantic, because it felt real, because she remembered that night. She remembered him staring at his laptop with both hands covering his face. She remembered sitting beside him in old sweatpants while reheating leftover pasta because neither of them had eaten dinner. She remembered him saying, "What if I ruin everything?" And she remembered answering, "Then we'll figure it out. Not you, we'll." She remembered that clearly. Then Daniel started talking. Rachel listened. At first, nothing felt strange. He talked about hating his previous job, about feeling exhausted all the time, about sitting in traffic every morning and already wanting to go home. People laughed. Daniel smiled. Then he continued. Rachel waited, and kept waiting, because her part never came. The apartment never came. The kitchen floor never came. The nights where she sat beside him rewriting resumes never came. She never came. The story ended. Everyone laughed. Someone raised a glass. The conversation moved somewhere else. Rachel sat there staring at Daniel, because it suddenly felt like she had just watched someone quietly remove her from a memory while sitting directly beside her. At first, she told herself she was overreacting. People shortened stories. People forgot details. People changed how they told things. Normal people didn't become upset over something so small. But once the thought entered her mind, it stayed. And then something uncomfortable happened. Rachel started remembering. Not one thing, many things, small things. Daniel had recently started saying "I" instead of "we" when talking about things they had built together. "I finally found this apartment. I decided to move here. I started doing that years ago." Tiny changes, tiny enough to disappear while they were happening. Months earlier, Rachel had painted part of their living room while Daniel worked late because he kept saying he never had time. She remembered spending an entire Saturday moving furniture and getting paint in her hair and laughing because she somehow managed to step directly into the paint tray. When Daniel invited friends over afterward, Rachel remembered him smiling and saying, "I finally fixed this room." At the time, she hadn't thought much about it. Now she remembered standing there, holding a drink, and feeling something small twist inside her. Not pain. Something lighter. Something easier to ignore. Now it returned, stronger. Another memory surfaced. 3 weeks earlier, Daniel had posted photos from a weekend trip they took together. Rachel remembered opening them later that evening. Mountain views, coffee shops, sunlight through trees. Daniel appeared in several photos. Rachel appeared in none. At the time, she had laughed and sent him, "Apparently I wasn't there." Daniel replied with a laughing emoji and, "Oops." Nothing else. Back then it felt insignificant. Now, suddenly, it didn't. Later that night, they drove home in silence. Daniel was talking about something that happened at work. Rachel barely heard him. Because she kept replaying the dinner, kept replaying the story, kept replaying the strange feeling of listening to her own life and suddenly realizing she no longer existed inside it. When they got home, Daniel walked into the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. Rachel stayed near the doorway. Then she asked quietly, "Why didn't you mention me?" Daniel looked confused. "What?" "In your story." Daniel stared at her, then laughed softly, not cruelly, not intentionally, just automatically. "What are you talking about?" Rachel looked at him for several seconds, because suddenly she realized she wasn't asking about one story anymore. She was asking something much bigger. She was asking when he had started separating himself from them. Daniel's expression slowly changed. The confusion disappeared first. Then something else appeared. Recognition. And somehow that hurt immediately. Because recognition meant he understood. He just hadn't noticed. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then quietly he asked, "You noticed that?" Rachel felt something tighten painfully in her chest, because suddenly she understood something terrible. He hadn't hidden it. He had simply stopped seeing it. Stopped seeing her in places where she used to exist naturally. Stopped seeing them. Later that night, Rachel lay awake beside him while Daniel slept. She looked at the ceiling for hours because she kept thinking about something strange. People imagine betrayal as discovering something new, a message, a person, a lie. But maybe some betrayals happen differently. Maybe sometimes betrayal is slowly disappearing from someone's future while still being present in their past. And maybe the quietest kind of heartbreak happens when the person beside you stops telling your story like you were ever standing in it. If this story felt familiar, there are more like it here.